Piece by Piece, as I mentioned, Lego documentary film that has been in the works for a long time now. About 2013 was the first time that Pharrell started to consider maybe thinking about making a documentary feature film about his career and his life, sort of telling his story. But this movie ultimately got in motion really significantly and really seriously around 2019, and so they certainly went into production on this, but decided to do something wildly different and tell the story of Pharrell in Lego animated form, which I dare to say that it just hasn't been done before. Very unique proposition, and this is also only the fifth Lego film that's been released theatrically. Formerly, the Lego company had a distribution and licensing agreement with Warner Brothers, and so they released a number of films such as the Lego movie, the Lego Ninjago movie, the Lego Batman movie, but that expired a few years ago, and they actually re-signed a new licensing agreement with Universal Pictures. And so this is the first project out of the gate between that license between Lego and Universal Pictures, and they decided to go ahead and release this Pharrell documentary telling, again, the story of his life and his music career. And so we got a chance to also check this out this past weekend. So with all of that out the way, I'll pass it to you, man. What'd you think about Piece by Piece?
I was, of course, super excited to see this film. One, Lego films have been slapping since they came out, but also you add in the fact that Pharrell, one of the best producers that we've ever gotten in life, especially hip hop culture, is getting a different biopic. Like one of the most creative minds getting one of the most creative biopics, I thought was a pretty cool idea. And so I came in again pretty excited to see what was going to happen here. And it was cool, man. I had a good time. I think watching everything unfold on screen. There was a lot of creative beats when it came to this film. Of course, I mean, it's a Lego documentary, but I didn't think it would be as I think as documentary-esque as it was, if that makes sense, because it was Lego. I don't know. I thought something else was going to happen, but no, like they're literally doing interviews and people look like Legos, but they're the same voiceovers from the people that they're interviewing, and I thought that was a pretty cool spin on things, and a different way to direct a film. This might be one of the hardest, I think, things to direct if you really think about it. Everything that's going on, some mix between documentary and Lego movie, which is really hard. But I think with what they had, they did fine. Not the most original biopic we've ever seen, right? Like there's been a ton of rags to riches stories, and there is something about it when it comes to Pharrell where, to be honest, Pharrell isn't like the most humble person in the world, but it was. I think it was fun to see. I think the journey of how he got to where he is today, because there was a lot of details that I did not know, and so I enjoyed those parts of the film. Even more so, I enjoyed the parts to get introspect into how he thought about some things, or how some songs came along, how some beats came along, how some of these stories progressed to get us, again, some of the best songs that had ever hit the radio. I thought that a lot of that stuff was really cool. And I think in terms of artistic expression, I mean, again, it's one of the most creative things that I've seen in a while. So I enjoyed it. It's not the most perfect thing I've ever seen, but I thought it was very well done with what they had. The only other thing is it felt like some things were missing in the story. It was a decent runtime. It wasn't like this thing was short. But I was like, it just always felt like there was why didn't we talk about this thing over here? Especially if you know hip hop history or you know some things about Pharrell. You're like, wait, but what about this thing? Wait, what about that thing? And there was so much in it. It was hard, I think, to focus on some of the important pieces and aspects of Pharrell's life that I would like, let's dive into that. And they would like touch on the surface. But overall, man, I liked it. I think I just wanted a little bit more, but it was definitely an enjoyable watching experience for what it was.
So, Letterbox tells me that I have watched in my lifetime 530 documentaries. It's a lot of documentaries, but I've
It's a
never
lot of
seen a
documentaries.
documentary told in Lego form. That is a completely unique proposition. And once I heard about that, because the first time I saw this trailer, I thought it was just like a narrative fictional story. And then quickly after that, I read like, no, this is the documentary about Pharrell's life. He just wanted to do it with Legos. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I like that. That's cool. We haven't seen that before. And I appreciate that decision, because in this day and age, especially with the boom of streaming over the past 10 or 15 years, the amount of documentaries that we get is
Mhm.
ridiculous. We get so many documentaries about everything, every subset of culture, every person, every individual across sports, music, industry, fashion, whatever it is. They find a way to turn it into a documentary. And I'm a sucker because I watch a lot of them, but most of them are very cookie cutter. They're very surface level. They don't really explore things all that deeply. It's a rarity to see something that truly dives in and I think ultimately teaches you something. And so I was
Mhm.
looking for that more than anything in this documentary because Pharrell is somewhat of a enigmatic figure. We know certain things about him, but not a ton. And so I was very
Mhm.
curious to see what we were going to do here, especially considering in terms of like hip hop documentaries over the years, most hip hop documentaries that I can think of that I really, really resonate with, they're mostly told in the zeitgeist and in the moment of the artist's peak energy and peak moment. They're not really reflective on their entire career. We don't get a ton of
Mhm.
those unless an artist has unfortunately passed away, like a Biggie or Tupac. And so that was also another really curious proposition. And ultimately, with Piece by Piece, I'll say this: very creative stuff. The animation was gorgeous. The colors, the vivid imagery was all just beautifully done. You could tell that they worked really hard on this to do something unique, and it also just presented an opportunity to do something with a documentary sort of story, but in Lego form, to which you can create imagery and moments that you just normally could not execute in a traditional documentary live action. You can be more storytelling esque in your ability to
Mhm.
communicate something. You can recreate everything. You don't need archival footage. You don't need old things that you have to license out from Getty or something like that. Like you can just recreate and tell these stories in really, really unique ways. And I also appreciate that in the creation of this, they very much focused on creating Lego pieces that accurately represented styles and dress and skin tones of African Americans and Black people. Like
Yeah.
that's obviously something that they haven't probably thought of before, but in making this movie, because it does feature people like Jay-Z and Busta Rhymes and all these other people, Kendrick Lamar, who are going to speak on behalf of Pharrell, they have to consider hairstyles and skin
Mhm.
tones and those things, and they actually took extra care into bringing that to life in a very meaningful and authentic way. And so I appreciate that effort and that work that went into that. But I will say, ultimately, as a story, as a memento on Pharrell's life and career, didn't really learn a ton. I found that the
Mhm.
first, not even half, but maybe the first 30 minutes of the movie where you're examining his upbringing, his small beginnings in Virginia Beach, the connections that he had with certain other artists that also rose up at that time. That stuff was insightful. And I thought that that was the most interesting aspect of the documentary. Once we get to, okay, now he's successful and he's completely crossed over, I
Yeah.
find that the momentum of the story completely grinds to a halt because no longer do you learn anything. And now it just becomes sort of a jukebox rotation of his greatest hits, which I'll admit I enjoy hearing that stuff, but also I can fire up Spotify. I don't need to come to the movies to see
Mhm.
that. And I just found that it lacked a lot of insightful learnings about who he is really as a person, because one thing I was looking for was like, okay, there has to be a moment of adversity. There has to be a moment where something really bad happens to his career or his life that presents a challenge, and we have to see him overcome that and reach this new plateau, so to say. And I guess the deepest thing that we got to that we examined was that he didn't have a hit for a couple of years.
Mhm.
Okay. Like, sorry, Pharrell, that's not that deep, my guy. Like, you maybe went what, 3 or 4 years without like a huge hit? Okay. So what? Like, you were still super successful. People still called you a legend. That's not like really a challenge. I mean,
Mhm.
creatively it is, but as a story, as a film, as the life, sort of encapsulation of what you've been through, I know that there has to be more stuff, but I feel like he's probably a little cagey about that and doesn't want to be super revelatory in that respect. There was even a moment where we see his wife is a part of the
Mhm.
film, and she hasn't done like a public sit down interview before. And I thought, okay, now we're really going to learn some stuff that we couldn't get anywhere else.
Yep.
And we learned nothing. She doesn't say anything. She just like she's just like, okay, he just wasn't ready to marry me. Well, why, Pharrell? Why not? We don't ever dive into that.
Let's
We don't
talk
ever
about it.
unpack any of that. He just wasn't ready.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden he's ready. Like, we don't unpack, well, what exactly was going on there? There has to be more to that story, but the personal aspect of it is never really unpacked. And this is again consistent with just a lot of documentary films that we get these day and age, when you have the subject attached as a producer, as
Mhm.
somebody who gets final approval over final cut, whatever the case may be. there's only so far that they're allowing the veil to be pulled back. And this
Yep.
just becomes a recurring thing over and over again. And unfortunately, I think that that's the same case here. I love the idea. I love the creative aspect behind it. But at the end of the day, it's just a gimmick. It's just a gimmick to use Lego pieces. Like it doesn't necessarily inform anything that we couldn't have already learned from just reading stuff, or if you're already sort of a hip hop historian. And so I was let down by it in that aspect. I appreciate the effort and the attempt and the desire to do something that nobody else has done. I'll always have respect for that. But the execution of it, it was just okay. It was just fine. And I just wish that there was a little bit more there. But it was a pleasure seeing other people, pop up. Snoop Dogg had a really funny sequence in the movie.
He did.
Hearing Gwen Stefani was cool. Justin Timberlake. Some of those people you probably could have heard from more. But at the end of the day, it is what it is. But it's a fine film. But I do think people will enjoy it if you just enjoy the music and the story and just sort of an inspirational sort of montage of what it takes to sort of persevere through challenges throughout your life. It could be really cool, and it's appealing to kids too, obviously, because it has the Lego animation aspect of it. So overall, a pretty good, I think, family adventure for a lot of people. But folks, those are all of our thoughts on the brand new documentary Lego film Piece by Piece. If you've checked this out, hit us up and let us know what you think.